Hey, welcome to the channel. My name is Eric, and today we're going to start off with our 10-part series on how to diagnose versus fixing. So I thought, well, let's first explain the differences, okay? Back years ago, I've been turning wrenches quite a while. I'm not considered a great mechanic, but I can get myself into trouble, right? And that probably defines most of you guys. But nobody ever taught how to check this or this or this. It was just it came with time. The old mechanic where he's heard that before, so he starts leaning that direction. And I can tell you more often than not, by me doing the impulse of going right to the fix, it's bit me in the ass. And my goal as a shop is to keep the costs down for my customers. That means not spending their money on something they didn't need. If you got the attitude of it's not my money, it's the customers, it's not a good attitude to have, and you probably are not going to be in business that long anyways. I know that with a shop, I have to treat my customers as number one. I'm watching how much money we're spending on their unit. I make sure that they know that I will not spend a dime more on theirs than I would my own. If it starts getting expensive, or I know it's going to start getting expensive, I will have been on the phone with my customer talking, just giving them choices, options of what they want to do, okay? So it was never really taught how to diagnose stuff, and it's not that it wasn't available, it's just that nobody hardly ever did it. And then YouTube showed up, and YouTube has got a gazillion videos on how to fix stuff. But go out and try to find one that shows you how to diagnose something to see if that's really your problem. See, there aren't that many, are there? Because everybody is old school, go it in a fix it mode, parts replacing, and hopefully eventually it'll turn out okay, right? So let me give you an example. The biggest thing with diagnosing, you get your 4 parts: compression, fire, fuel, and air. Okay? If all 4 of those are present, she will run. You take her with a carburetor, what have you, that's minor stuff. All right? But in the diagnostic mode, if we go ahead and do compression and we can't get the compression where it needs to be, and we jump to the valves if it's got overhead valves and that doesn't change anything, you don't want to spend any more money, do you? Because you're going to rebuild that engine. That's the only option you have at that point in time. But if you're in the fix-it mode, you automatically think, well, it's got to be over here. So you start adding parts. You clean the carburetor, you put a new coil on, you end up buying another carburetor, throwing it on. It's still not running right. You've already replaced 2 coils on it. Got to be the regulator. You're going around and around, and finally, it's like, did you check compression? Well, no, because I thought it was. All right, that's your first mistake. Because had you checked compression first, you wouldn't have done all that other stuff, right? Because you'd already known that if we don't have enough compression, no matter what we do other than a rebuild, is going to make that engine run or run correctly. I've seen engines run at 50, 60. And the Predator beasts and the Chinese engines run great at 55 to 62, 63. The old flathead used to run at 50. Now, what we're looking for, even out of the 2 strokes with the automatic compression relief systems, we're looking for at least 75 on those. 100 is better. 120 is really good, right? But that's the whole thing with diagnosing, is instead of going with your impulse, and that is to just start fixing, we're going to go through the 4-point, and we're going to start with a compression tester, and we're going to check both. If it's a twin cylinder, I'm checking both cylinders, okay? And if I can't get both of them up over 100, I'm going to check the valves. If the valves have problems or clearance, or they can be adjusted and the compression comes up, then we can move to fire. But not until we get our compression where it needs to be. That's diagnosing. you're eliminating as you're going all the big four, right? So let's say we got the compression up on both cylinders, if it's a twin, or on one if it's a single. We're going to go on to fire, right? And we're going to put a spark tester on it and look for fire. If it's not throwing a spark, you just don't make that leap to, okay, it's got to be the coil. So you get on eBay, Amazon, your local dealer, and you order yourself a coil. All right? Put the coil on, doesn't do anything different. And you're like, now what? Well, there were things that you could have done to that coil to see if it was actually the coil. The first thing I do, if I'm not getting fire off that coil, is I pull the small ground wire that clips on and then try it. If I get fire, then I know it's somewhere in the system. Could be a safety switch, could be a wire grounding to the frame, but I know that the coil and the engine are fine. I just got to henpeck my way through with a test light to see where am I grounding out. So that's diagnosing versus fixing. I didn't put a new coil on it because I pulled the ground wire off, and now it's firing and everything is running the way it's supposed to until I put the ground wire back in, and then everything shuts off. I don't have any fire. That's diagnosing versus fixing. You've eliminated the coils, you've eliminated the compression. Now we're going to go on to fuel. In our shop, if we don't know what the fuel is, we dump it, okay? We run, and thank you, Jason, for the PRI-G. That stuff we mix up 5 gallons at a time, and it's ready to go even for the 2 strokes. I add the PRI-G. You know, we've had less headaches with running that, and you know, the bad thing is you can't get small bottles, right? I think the smallest is like a 16 ounce, and you could do like 250 gallons. So on Amazon, where I got mine, you can buy one of those and it'll last you the rest of your life, right? But I want good fuel, because I have yet to find somebody that can look at the fuel, smell the fuel, taste the fuel, and do the finger test and tell me that it's 100% good fuel. It just don't happen, right? And a lot of times with your fuel, whether it's sitting in a fuel can, what have you, the shelf life on gas with ethanol is pretty minute, okay? That means buy it as you need it. Don't start stockpiling it up. And the worst thing you can do is fill something to the brim if you know you're going to be parking it for a while. What happens with the fuel when you have ethanol? And you're going to say, well, I get 91 premium. Well, if you really look at it, it says even the 91s can contain up to 10% alcohol of ethanol. All right, so why is all this so important in the grand scheme of things? All right, when it sits, it separates, okay? You're going to get your water on the bottom, the moisture that it draws out of the air, and then your ethanol is going to sit on top of that water, and then the gas will sit on top of the ethanol. And that's why in the spring of the year, you go out and you start your lawnmower. It starts up for you. You drive out, you do a couple passes, and then it starts spitting and sputtering and it quits. What is that telling you? I know what it's telling me is that you had good gas in the carburetor and in the fuel pump, fuel lines, but in your gas tank, it was all water on the bottom. So as you were drawing that gas down through and running your lawnmower, you're sucking all that water right down through into the carburetor. And I have yet to see a lawnmower that will run on pure water. So at that point of the game, you have no other options than to drain the carburetor, drain all the fuel lines, and drain that tank empty and let it air dry. And then put everything back together, put good fuel in it, and that will normally solve your problem. Going and getting a new carburetor because you think it's the carburetor is spending money where you really don't need to spend it. I already know what the issue is. You're trying to run it on straight up water, okay? And then the last thing that we have to look at is the air system, the air filter. Those machines are made to run with that kind of a resistance from the air filter to run at optimum, capacities. If you have a dirty air filter, it's going to act like it's flooding it, like you have the choke on part way, and she'll start doing all funky things. If you don't have an air filter on it, which I've seen guys, well, mine will run better without the air filter. Now you're running it too lean, okay? And that can damage that engine as well. Now, when we get through that 4 points and we have every one of those 4 points addressed, does that mean that the engine is going to run 100% from that point on? No, it's eliminated all the big things, okay? So now we're going to have to, if we drain the system, we put fresh fuel in it, and we're still having problems, we may have to take that carburetor off, tear it apart, throw it in the ultrasonic cleaner for a couple hours while we're doing something else, and then rebuild it back and put it back on. Could be varnishes in there. The other thing that we look at is, are we getting fuel? Because the fuel solenoid on the bottom of most carburetors now, that when you turn the key off, the plunger goes up and it keeps the fuel from going into the carburetor. Now, over time, especially if it sits in that fuel, that varnish will build up around it. So it doesn't allow it to, when you turn the key on, to retract to let the fuel. So you're going to crank, and it's not going to start because it's not allowing the fuel through it. Simple fix. Take the fuel solenoid right off the bottom, plug it in, turn the key on and off to see if it's actually moving. A lot of times you can take carburetor cleaner and spray it good and then move it up and down and then plug it back in and it will work for you. I think I've only replaced one fuel solenoid in the last 10 years. The rest of them were able to get cleaned up, put back in, and save my customer money. I'm going to start leaving it right there, okay? But what I'm asking out of you is, if you haven't subscribed, liked, rang the bell and commented, please do. It helps this channel out. It helps me out immensely, and we'll get more people involved. Now, as far as the 10-part series, you guys tell me what 10 parts to do. I can do 10 parts, but it may not address something that you have going on right now. So post in the comments things that you are having issues with. And for you guys who have been doing it for a long time, I'm kind of leaning on you too as well, that if I misspeak or something like that, I want you to correct me. If I'm not giving enough information that you feel that more need to be added, please add it. I've always run this channel as group participation. The camaraderie, the helpfulness, trying to help each other out is the main goal of this channel. The 10-part series for the course costs you nothing. Just your time just watching YouTube. The 1,000+ videos that I already have up here on the channel are free for the taking. And what I normally tell everybody, especially you newbies, is take what you can use and leave the rest, okay? You can't do it exactly like Eric does it, whether it's business or you need to walk to your own mantra and learn the way you're used to learning, okay? So I'm looking forward to this. Should be a lot of fun. We can have fun doing this. And on that note, you guys have a great day, and let's get part 1 going.